one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing on this podcast is trying to find reality through like wishful thinking. And, I have a lot of conversations about AI, for example. And I see so many parallels with AI because we're saying that AI could be a big problem. But when you look at human incentives, the US are trying to beat China, and China are trying to beat this person, and they're trying to beat them. And even in the US, you've got OpenAI trying to beat Anthropic. So when you look at incentives, you go, okay, I kind of can see how this is going to play out. There's an inevitability to it. And the example you gave there, what I'm hearing is reduce pollution, which would have meant getting China and India and the US and the UK and Europe to all cooperate, which has proven to be
impossible with our political systems.
And the other thing you mentioned was stopping people having babies, stabilizing at 4 billion, which would have come with a lopsided economy and lots of other problems. I mean, we've seen that it wasn't, it looks like it wasn't possible.
And the fossil fuel lobbies and conventional economists undermined all that stuff. So the reason we're having this conversation now is you basically think we've got to adapt. It's like we're going up a hill, so we've got to, have a lighter car or more power for the car, or whatever else. I'm saying we're 5 inches from a brick wall, okay? And we're not going to slow down in time to hit the wall. We're going to hit the wall. Brace yourselves. Okay, brace for impact. That's the advice I've given.
But when I asked you earlier if we need world government, you said yes. If I asked,
it's not going to happen. I know it's not going to happen. The only way out of this is to do it collectively. With this obvious example, we're going to do it competitively and shoot each other in the foot in the process. If we'd realised that each nation had to reduce its energy consumption or get a higher efficiency out of its energy 50 years ago,
but who's
looked
the
at
we?
The engineering.
Who's the we that would have realised this? You would have needed a world government back then.
You would have needed, and you needed politicians who understand what the engineers told them.
Right.
Instead, you had politicians who listened to the media and listened to the oil interests and trivialized these whole dangers. And that's why now it's catastrophic. I mean, I truly believe we're on the edge of a catastrophic breakdown of human civilization. In that situation, if you wanted to stop it happening, you would need to have global coordination, authoritarian, et cetera, If we'd done it 50 years ago, we wouldn't need any of this.
Steve, how would you go to India and tell them that they can't use energy when they're at the very some people in India.
The women are dying in childbirth and their children are starving.
Yeah. I mean,
and you go to India. No, you can't grow.
We have an ignorance about the biosphere on which we live. Okay, our understanding of the biosphere itself and the impact that our civilization has on the biosphere is trivial. And therefore, we have these discussions as if the biosphere will take care of itself.
I think we all agree that climate change is both real and a huge existential problem. And the evidence for that is we can observe it, we can measure it. Even now we're going through one of the sort of record-breaking periods in weather volatility. But sort of the Western United States and Western Europe are experiencing historically severe, record-breaking weathers at the moment. So my next question logically becomes, what can we do about it?
It's too late. Okay? The extent to which we're unaware of the energy forces we've unleashed on the planet are huge. And when you find that people think all this stuff is going to happen and it's a couple of decades away or half a century away and somebody else's problem.
When is it going to happen?
I've got a feeling the next 10 years.
Next 10 years.
What's going to happen?
The beginnings
of the breakdown of our capacity to maintain a civilization on the planet. I'm probably wrong in terms of timing. I'm probably putting it too far in the future. Okay, I might be wrong.
So it might be less than 10.
Yeah, it could be less.
I really, really hope all three of us live long enough to be able to sit down.
So do I. I hope I'm wrong. I'm desperately hoping I'm wrong.
Steve, can you define what you mean by climate breakdown specifically? What does that look like for me as I walk out onto the street?
Let's say one of the big ones, again, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, the AMOC. The most recent estimates is that's going to stop functioning sometime between last year, because it hasn't yet happened, and 2095. When that happens, the temperature on Europe will fall, roughly speaking, by 3 degrees per decade for 3 decades. So the temperature in Europe on average will fall by 10 degrees. The extremes will become even more ridiculous. So this is research from Tim Lenton, Exeter University, Professor of Climate Change. The range of temperatures in London will be between -20 and +35. Okay. Now, what's the chance of London surviving that scale of temperature range? You can't even cope with leaves on the train lines here. That's one thing I found ridiculous.
That's
As
right.
an Australian arriving in London and find my train from Waterloo to Kingston is slowed down because there are leaves on the rail. Leaves on the rail? Has that never happened before? What are your engineers doing about that? Why don't you have trains that move the leaves?
So, Steve,
this sort of unprepared nature, we are completely unprepared for the scale of what we face.
Look, as someone who is Russian, minus 20 is a nice spring day for me. But look, we're being silly about it. I think if we ground this conversation in the realms of the possible and look at what we can do, it seems to me that the only thing we can do is create forms of energy that do not produce emissions that we believe are contributing to the changing climate. A world government's not going to happen.
I agree.
The level of coordination is not going to happen. The authoritarian world run by engineers is not going to happen. These are not realistic things to be talking about. Let's talk about what we actually can do.
Yeah.
What we can do is plow all the money we have wrongly plowed into trying to mitigate this issue, into trying to create forms of energy that are actually going to work not only to solve this problem, but actually to fuel prosperity, to fuel technological innovation, and to create a better world, as opposed to thinking that, like we're all doomed and nothing is possible.
So let's take a look at this situation, which is somewhat linked. This is the Strait of Hormuz.
Yep.
This is US oil reserves at the moment in rapid decline.
Yep.
What is your perspective on what's going on in the Middle East at the moment, Konstantin? Why has this happened?
So one of the things I think is very important not to do is project our own ideas onto people who we've never met, like President Trump. I assume none of us have met President Trump, etc. So I can only tell you what I know from speaking to people in his administration, other people who have some access to the administration's thinking, etc. My understanding, and it's a very frustrating thing to have to articulate and to believe, but it is true, is that the level of analysis we all have about the complicated machinations of how different departments in the US government, work out the complexity, it really isn't as complicated than that. And I think we all wish it was sometimes. Yeah. Trump walked into a trap. Yep. I think he walked into a trap that it was a sugar high from Venezuela. There was a kind of feeling of perhaps invulnerability and a sort of belief that we can solve every problem. And Iran is different to Venezuela. Iran has the ability to choke off the world's supply, not just of oil, but I think, as you discussed with Steve when you recently had him on, of gas, of helium, natural gas, of helium, fertilizer, and lots of other things. And it hasn't quite fed through to the global economy in the way that people have talked about in a catastrophizing way. But if this carries on, it will do, because our stocks, you've got this talking about oil, but it's stocks of other things too, are going to start running out, and the price of those things is going to go up. And so then the many predictions that people like Steve have been making are likely to come true. We had Senator Ted Cruz on our show around the time this war was launched. He's not only a huge supporter of President Trump, but a huge supporter of this conflict. He advocated for it. And when I said to him, look, come the midterms, this is not going to be good for you and for your party. And his exact words, quote him from memory, so maybe they're not his exact words, but the broad theme of what he said was, if we're still in this conflict come the midterms, we failed. I suspect that is almost certainly going to happen. You've just shown me a picture of President Trump's approval ratings. They seem to verify what I'm saying. And so I think he's walked into a trap. And you've had people on your show to articulate why the trap will continue to bear fruit for the Iranians. There's this great saying in the East. In the West, you have all the watches. In the East, we have all the time. They don't have midterms in Iran. They can wait. They can take the pain and the punishment that they're currently experiencing for as long as they really need to. This is kind of like their Battle of Stalingrad. They can take the pain, they can throw men at the problem, they can throw bodies at the problem as long as they need to, because they know the US can't go the distance. And because of that, the incentive structure is for the Iranians to hold on as long as possible, because they know that the US will have to deal with this reality. So I think it's been a catastrophic mistake.
And do you think Iran are actually going to be stronger on the other side of this?
Nobody knows exactly. They're definitely stronger now than they were. But look, all of this is very unpredictable. I think we should be very careful about making predictions about the future of countries that we understand very little in the West from the outside. It's very difficult for anyone outside of Iran today to understand what's happening in Iran. The example I like to give is Nikola Ceausescu, Ceausescu, the Romanian dictator. He had a 92% approval rating the day before he was seized with his wife and summarily executed. The predictability of how long a regime survives in these countries is difficult to judge from the outside. Currently, Iran has a chokehold on the global economy, and they're leveraging it very powerfully.
You predicted a famine, Steve.
Yeah, I think it's still going to happen. But the thing is, it's a question of what the stocks are. Like, for example, we know this story about the US Strategic Oil Reserve. We also know that China had a huge reserve, and they've run that reserve down from about 1.5 years of supply of oil for them to, I don't know what amount, but they're going back in the opposite direction now. So we didn't need to know what the stocks of all these products were around the globe beforehand. So when you make an estimate, yes, there's going to be a running out of oil. Well, China reduced its oil consumption. America's running its stock down. At some point, though, because the flow is still blocked through this strait, then there won't be the oil, there won't be the fertilizer, there won't be the sulfuric acid. All these things will not be available, and then we'll have a physical hit coming out of all that. And I completely agree. Trump was sold a pup, it's the old expression, and we're paying the price.
Is there any way out of this, in your view, Steve?
I think America has to leave the Middle East. That's about the only long-term resolution. America stops interfering in the Middle East.
If they were to leave now, the issue that they face is they've now given Iran, they've sort of established a precedence where Iran can use the Strait of Hormuz, which is like a proxy for the global economy, as a bargaining chip. And so if you're Iran, you now can proceed potentially with your nuclear program. And if they come back, you shut down the global economy via the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah.
Or you sort of kneecap it at least.
Which is why it was a catastrophically bad decision to provoke them in the first place.
The thing that no one really talks about, and it's an issue close to my heart with the Ukrainian family and the conflict there is something that's very important to me, is one of the hopes I had for the Trump presidency was that he would find a way to bring that conflict to a close. This has only made things better for Russia. The fact that they've had to lift sanctions on Russian oil, for example, in order to compensate for the lack of supply. This is allowing Russia to continue this war and to fund its war. And so it's been a disastrous intervention and really, really unfortunate in the way that it's been done.
Do you think this is going to completely tarnish his presidency more than any other issue?
It depends on how it ends. The only way out of this that I can see at the moment, look, again, these things are very unpredictable. I think we really should be very honest about that. But the way that I see it at the moment is his only way out, really. I don't know about pulling out the Middle East. That seems a bit extreme. But the best way for him to get out of this is to find a way to sell Americans on the lie that it's been a success.
Yeah.
That is the only way he's going to get out of this. If he can find a way to sell a terrible deal, which he's going to have to sign with Iran, as a victory for America, which Trump is uniquely placed to do, let's be honest, right? His ability to sell things is pretty strong. Then he can leave with less egg on his face than otherwise, at which point how the world judges him for a temporary interruption of oil and fertilizer and gas supplies, how history judges him is hard to say, not least because he's still got time in his term to either do good things or to do more things that don't work out well. But at the moment, this is a conflict whose only resolution, that it seems to me, is for him to accept the reality that he made a mistake and to find a way to extricate himself from it without admitting it was a mistake.
Steve mentioned that he predicts a famine is coming, a global famine.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Depends how long it runs. It depends how long. I mean, I have friends in Australia who are farmers, and when this first started, they were telling me they can't get hands on fertilizer beyond, even at the quotas they already had.
And again, context here is that a lot of fertilizer comes from via the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah. And goes to all over the world. But even if, say you get your supply of fertilizer not from the Middle East, well, given that the supply of fertilizer is no longer coming from the Middle East, the people who used to get it from the Middle East now have to get it from somewhere else, and there's less of it to go around, therefore price goes up, quotas, allocations go down, you can't plant the crops, etc., 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 etc.
Yeah, like on the Australian front, I've got friends in the same boat, and they tell me that about half the usual wheat crop has been laid because of the cost of fertilizer, and Australia used to produce 7 times as much food as it needs for its people. So it's going to produce 3 times as much food, 3.5, and that means, of course, less availability for food around the world. And this is going to be a global phenomenon. Where it hits, again, very hard to say because you don't know what stocks exist. You don't know how dependent different agricultural systems are on the fertilizer that they bring in. But yeah, it's a catastrophically bad decision. And the only way that Trump can get out of it is to lose and declare victory. That's what he'll do.
There's midterm elections coming up, which could have a big impact, but there's also the 2028 elections coming up for the presidential position. A lot of people are now forecasting that the Democrats, the left side of politics, or potentially even a socialist candidate, is going to get into office. Do you think that would be a net good thing for the United States?
Well, after Trump, anything is going to be better. Okay, so yes, I do, because again, I think America's pushed far too far in the independent self-reliance, don't let the state do anything, and you get an unbalanced economy out of that.
Do you think the US needs a democratic socialist candidate?
Yeah.
Why?
Because they will promote the need for the public goods that the public sector provides and the private sector does not. We've got the classic illustration here with water supplies for the UK. We privatised them 40 years ago. What's the consequence? You can't swim in any river in the United Kingdom anymore because they're polluted with feces. The beaches are impossible as well. We have one less dam than we had 40 years ago. Privatising resources which take a long time to construct is a recipe for those resources not to be created in the very first instance. Whereas China, with obviously a socialist economy, has built the energy supplies you were mentioning earlier. They've provided the transportation, the education. It's extremely hard to get in. You can't buy your way in. The education is publicly funded. All these things show that you need a balance between the public and private sector. And America's gone too far in the private direction, and we now need to switch back in the opposite direction.
China's model would be better.
Yeah, because, I mean, if it provides the infrastructure that enables a private sector to thrive. If you don't have the energy, as you were saying earlier, then you can't even imagine building the private sector facilities, or if you do, they've got to be used at the expense of some other activity. So we're seeing Americans protesting about rising energy prices because of data centers being established and rising problems with the water supply for the same reason.
Steve would prefer a socialist government coming into the United States in the next election cycle.
Democratic socialist, there's a big difference.
Democratic socialism is the same idea that has been tried repeatedly and failed repeatedly, which is communism. It's sort of the idea that if we elect communists instead of having them win in the revolution, that it'll all be better. It won't be. Their policies don't work. And by the way, the
Soviet policies obviously did not work.
Yeah.
Russia failed, no doubt about that. Okay. China's succeeding. So what's the difference between the two? Why is the Chinese system being so successful and the Russian system so abjectly a failure?
Well, in the 1930s, a lot of people thought that the rapid industrialization of the Soviet Union was a massive success. I think it's worth remembering that communist societies lie all the time about the real figures in their economy, and they create fake growth and fake numbers about all of these things. We know, for example, that almost certainly, according to the intelligence assessment of pretty much every Western intelligence service, the COVID virus came from a lab in China. It's something they lied about to the world and still haven't paid any price for. And the way they lie about that is the way they will lie about other things, including economic growth and all sorts of other things. In the short term, models can look appealing if you don't understand the full implications of what it is. But also you got to remember that the Chinese system is not just about the economy. It's also about what rights people have and don't have. The right to express your opinion freely, the right to criticize the government, the right, I mean, we talk about private enterprise in China. If you're a private business owner in China, well, there's no such thing really, because the moment you are inconvenient to the government, you're going to disappear and come back suddenly with a totally different new set of beliefs about what's right and wrong and who's right and who's wrong. So I think we should be very, very, very careful about praising communist dictatorships.
I have friends in China, both nationals and immigrants, who tell me that the level of discussion and argument in China is far, far greater than people think. You don't get left versus right conversations. Okay, you've got a political system which you're not going to change, Communist Party be in control and so on. But the level of debate over what policies should be, whether the government should balance its books, whether the government should run a deficit, whether the government should build infrastructure or not, there's enormous debate there. So people do have, there's more conflict but it's mediated. It's not conflict that leads to flipping from one party 1 year to an opposite attitude at the next election and so on.
Do you think Stephen could run his show if he was a Chinese citizen in China and have any conversation he wanted?
I think so. I don't,
Really?
maybe not as broad as this one, probably more limited. I will agree with that. Okay. It probably would be more limited. But I've been involved, if you've spoken on the Chinese global television network, I presume.
I haven't.
Okay. Well, that's the conversations that I've had there are comparable to what I'm having here. And so those conversations get broadcast in China.
Well, you're clearly very in favor of China. It doesn't surprise me that they would have you on their TV channel. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is Xi Jinping, the current president of China, has purged dozens of people who are internal critics within his own party, people in the military, people in the political system who disappear one after another, and business leaders of all kinds. The reason I keep having to remember things, I've got the Jack Ma, but others too. I've got new dad brain, so I haven't slept properly.
That's
for about
fair enough. I understand that problem.
But yeah, so if you're a business owner in China, it's not really your business. It's kind of like in Russia. There's no private enterprise.
I think that's an exaggeration, okay, because the Russian situation, yes, there was only one motorbike making company in the entire country. China apparently has about 130 car companies, okay. They have managed to combine the central planning that the Soviets had with the competition that the West has in one model. And a lot of it comes back, and I'd love to know the extent to which they were influenced by a friend of mine called János Kornai, who was a Hungarian economist. He died about 4 years ago, who tried to understand why did the Soviet system fail and why did the American system grow. And he came down to saying that the Soviet system was constrained by supply. You couldn't get all the inputs you needed, and you had only one. There was no innovation taking place in the Soviet system. The Chinese system is rampant with private sector innovation, and companies are competing against each other rampantly in that system. Somehow they've managed to combine the state providing the infrastructure and the foundation and letting private diversity occur both between different corporations and between different provinces in China. So it's the same family of systems, but they've managed to overcome the drawback that the Soviet system had.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.